Ash Ridge, New Mexico Territory. Spring of 1884. The spring wind carried dust through the streets of Ash Ridge, mixing with the smell of manure and charred wood. It was the kind of dry day where nothing moved unless it had to. Folks gathered in the market square, drawn by the promise of livestock, tools, and something stranger. Her name was Kate Wynn, 22 years old. Blue dress faded at the seams. Hands clenched at her sides like she was holding something in. Her father shoved her into the center of the square like she was meat on display. "She can cook, sew, and keep quiet," he said. "Anyone with coin can take her home tonight." The crowd didn't laugh, not loudly at least, but the silence between the murmurs was worse. Women looked away. Children peeked from behind skirts. Kate stood there with the sun burning her skin and shame burning worse beneath it. "She's barren," her father added. "Tried for years, nothing happened. But she's got steady hands and teeth in her head. That counts for something." Kate didn't plead. She'd done that before. Once when her husband threw her out after 2 years of trying. Once when her wedding dress was torn from her by hands that used to hold her. It hadn't mattered then, so she stood in silence. Near the back of the crowd, her mother stood with a worn shawl pulled tight around her shoulders, eyes fixed on the ground, lips pressed into a line. She didn't speak, didn't stop it, just watched. And when the crowd parted, she drifted with them, head low, swallowed by the flow of people. Like she hadn't come to watch her daughter be sold, only to leave with everyone else. A man stepped forward, broad-shouldered, shirt stiff with dust and trail wear. A wide-brimmed hat cast a shadow over most of his face. His coat smelled of horse and pine. He didn't ask her name. He didn't look her over like a buyer. He simply reached into his coat, pulled out a leather pouch, and dropped coin on the table. No bartering, no questions. Her father raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" he said. "She don't come with a refund." The man didn't flinch, didn't look at Kate. "She won't be judged anymore," he said. And then he turned and walked away. Kate didn't move. The crowd had already begun to drift off. No one cared where she went now. Her father gave her one last push. "Go on. You're his now." She bent to pick up her satchel, just a pair of old shoes and a locket with her mother's face inside, and followed the stranger into the dust. The wagon waited near the blacksmith's, hitched to a pair of mules as quiet as their owner. Kate climbed up into the front of the wagon, settling beside the stranger without a word. She didn't know his name was Bo Thatcher. Not yet. Bo handed her a dented canteen. "Long ride," he said. The water tasted like tin and old wind. They rolled out past the edge of Ash Ridge, where the prairie opened like a page waiting to be written on. The sky went on forever. Fence posts leaned tired into the earth. No birds, just wind in the grass, and the occasional creak of leather. He didn't speak again, and she didn't ask. Kate studied his face when the brim of his hat lifted just enough. He wasn't old, but the sun had etched its history into his skin. 35, maybe. His hands rested loose on the reins, one scarred across the knuckle, another wrapped with a strip of torn cloth. No ring. "Why'd you take me?" she asked, not expecting an answer. He didn't look over. 5 kids, he said. No mother, no time. Her throat caught. "So, I'm a governess." "No," he said, "just someone not cruel. That's enough." By dusk, they reached a ranch tucked into the dry ribs of the land. The house leaned slightly westward, like it was listening for something that never came. A barn stood behind it, weathered gray. Chickens darted through the yard, squawking as the wagon pulled in. He stepped down, tied off the reins, and walked to the porch without asking if she'd follow. She did. The porch boards creaked under her weight. The front door wasn't a door at all, just a thick quilt nailed to the frame to keep the wind out. Inside, 5 faces looked up. 4 boys, 1 girl, all wide-eyed and red-cheeked, each holding still in the half-light. They'd lost their mother to a fever 2 winters back. Since then, the silence in that cabin had been louder than any storm. "This is Kate," Bo said. "She'll be staying." The youngest, Samson, maybe 5, walked straight to him and wrapped both arms around his leg. Bo bent down, scooped him up with one arm, and opened a door with the other. "Room's upstairs," he said to Kate. "Water's in the bucket, still warm." She climbed the stairs slowly, her hand trailing the wall. The bedroom was small and plain, a wash basin, a narrow bed, a window looking out toward an open field lined with fence posts and dry grass. She set her satchel down and sat on the edge of the bed. She didn't cry, not yet, but her hands trembled in her lap. And she stayed there, listening to the sounds of strangers in a house that wasn't hers. Not yet. Morning brought the smell of smoke, old coffee, and something burning in the pan. The cabin stirred early, footsteps on creaking boards, the thud of boots by the door, soft chatter broken by occasional coughs. Kate moved carefully. She didn't yet know who slept light, who spilled sugar, who liked their eggs hard or runny, if there were eggs at all. The children stayed quiet around her. Judah, the eldest, watched her with folded arms and a look too old for his age. Levi whispered to Gideon, who kept glancing at her like he was working out a problem in his head. Mira, the only girl, sat near the fire and clung to a scrap of fabric she refused to let go. Samson, youngest of the 5, hovered nearby and mimicked her every move in silence. She tried to cook. The beans turned to paste. The bread wouldn't rise. She spilled the coffee pot and the tin burned her hand. Later, she tried sewing a ripped sock and jabbed her finger twice. The needle rolled beneath the stove. She said nothing, only pressed her lips together and swept the floor until her shoulders ached. That afternoon, while lifting a pot of stew from the stove, her grip slipped. The cast iron crashed to the floor, stew splattering across the boards. The sound startled the hens outside. Inside, the children froze. Kate stood still, heart pounding, waiting for the shout, waiting for the snap she had heard before. Then the front door opened. Bo stepped in. He looked down at the mess, then at her. Without a word, he crouched, picked up the pot, dumped what was left, and wiped the floor with a towel. "It's just stew," he said. And that was it. He walked back outside. Kate stayed frozen for another minute, the rag still in her hand, the heat still rising in her throat. Except this time, it wasn't shame. It was something quieter, something she didn't yet have a name for. That night, after the dishes were scrubbed and the children had disappeared into their rooms, she sat on the porch with her hands in her lap. The night air was cool. Stars burned clean above the roofline. She tried not to cry. She failed. Later, she crept from room to room. Mira had kicked off her blanket. Levi mumbled in his sleep. Samson was curled up with his hand in his mouth, the way the very young still believed someone would carry them through the night. Mira stirred and whimpered. Her forehead felt warm, too warm. Kate stepped into the hall. Bo was already there. "She's burning," she said. "I need willow bark. Mint, if you have it." He didn't ask questions. He turned, and within minutes she had everything. She boiled water, crushed herbs, drenched cloth. She pressed the damp linen to Mira's face, cradled the girl's small frame, and hummed. She didn't stop. Not when the child shivered. Not when the fever raged. Not even when her own body sagged with exhaustion. She stayed up all night. By dawn, Mira opened her eyes and whispered hoarsely, "Pancakes." Bo stood in the doorway. He didn't say a thing, but the tension in his shoulders eased. His eyes stayed fixed on Kate like he was seeing something he hadn't expected, something strong, something holy. Kate didn't smile. She was too tired. But she didn't flinch from his gaze either. She simply nodded and turned back to the girl who was already dozing again in her arms. The next morning, when Kate came downstairs, steam curled from a kettle already warming on the stove. Next to it sat a tin mug and a piece of paper, folded once. 2 words, scratched in stiff, uneven handwriting. "Thank you." No name, no signature. but it didn't need one. She held the note for a moment longer than she meant to. Then she sat down, wrapped her hands around the mug, and sipped slowly. The tea was sharp, bitter with pine, but it warmed her chest like something solid. Through the window, the prairie stretched out, wind brushing through wild grass. She watched it in silence. Something in her, tired, tight, and long kept shut, began to shift. Later that day, she was rinsing pots behind the cabin when Samson came wandering up, his arms raised. "Maple," he said, bright and sure. She turned, startled. He wrapped his arms around her legs and grinned like he'd just named the moon. She didn't correct him. She bent down and pulled him close. And for the first time in weeks, she smiled. Not because someone expected her to, but because she wanted to. As spring settled into the bones of the land, the rhythm of the cabin began to change. Kate's hands found their steadiness again. Bread began to rise. Beans stayed whole. She stitched feed sacks into scarves, one for each child. They wore them without asking why. She taught letters by candlelight, helped Gideon trace his name on a piece of kindling, sang soft songs over cracked soup bowls, braided Mira's hair into 2 clean ropes, tying them with blue ribbon scavenged from an old trunk. She learned what each child feared. Judah hated thunder. Levi lied when he was embarrassed. Mira got quiet when she missed her mother. None of them asked her who she was. They watched what she did. They listened to how she stayed. The first time one of them said it, it came out like breathing. Levi passed her a spoon and muttered, "Here, Mama." The room went still for a beat. He didn't correct himself. Neither did she. The next day, Gideon said it. Then Mira. Then Samson, who'd already decided she belonged to him. And that was that. She was Mama now. No ceremony. No announcement. Just the slow naming of what already was. That night, Bo sat on the porch with a piece of wood in his lap, carving by lantern light. Kate walked past with a bundle of laundry in her arms. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked, eyes still on his hands. She paused. "I did," she said, "a while back." He nodded once. "Why didn't you?" Kate looked out at the dark fields where the swing she'd hung from the oak tree moved slowly in the breeze. "For the first time in my life," she said, "no one's asking me to be anything I'm not." The town of Dust Bend crouched low on the horizon, dry, sun-bleached, lined with shuttered windows and sharp eyes. Kate hadn't set foot there since the day her father sold her like livestock. One afternoon, Bo hitched the wagon and paused at the step. "Need salt." "And nails," he said. "Come if you want." Kate climbed up without asking why. The road to town rolled quiet and open. Dust kicked up behind the mules. Bo kept one hand on the reins, the other resting on his thigh. His hat stayed low. His words were fewer than usual. In Dust Bend, he went inside the general store. Kate waited on the porch, arms folded, eyes scanning the street. That's when she heard it. "Well, well, if it ain't the Barren ghost come back to town." The voice cracked sharp across the square. Kate turned. Her former mother-in-law stood near the dry goods stall, fanning herself with a folded newspaper. Beside her, clinging tight, stood the younger wife, lace gloves, red cheeks, and a hand resting too deliberately on a belly that hadn't yet rounded. "That's her?" the girl asked, loud enough for half the market to hear. "Oh, that's her," the older woman drawled. "Pretty, but cursed. Couldn't give us even a squealing pup." "I will," the girl said proudly. "A big, healthy boy. He'll carry the family name, not like her, useless as a cracked jar." Kate didn't respond. She stood still, jaw set, hands curling at her sides. She turned to leave. Then a shadow fell beside hers. Bo had stepped out of the store, a sack of salt in one arm, his eyes slow to blink. He looked at the two women only once, then turned to Kate. "She's the one who gets Mira to sleep when her legs ache," he said. "The one who taught Samson not to throw rocks. The one who makes that house feel like it has a roof again." Neither woman spoke. They didn't need to. Bo nodded toward the wagon. You ready? Kate nodded back. They walked away together, leaving the words behind them like dust. That night, Kate didn't speak of what happened. She tucked in the children, pulled quilts over bare shoulders, ran her hand over Gideon's hair as he slept. Later, she stepped onto the porch alone, shawl wrapped around her. Bo followed. He stood next to her, watching the stars scatter across the sky. You didn't have to say anything, she said. He kept his eyes ahead. I didn't say it for them. The air was thick that night, still and close, like the land was holding its breath. The lantern inside the cabin flickered behind the curtain, and the world outside lay dark and dry. Kate stepped out with a bucket in hand. The sky stretched black above her, stars dull behind a thin veil of heat. She moved toward the well, bare feet silent on the dirt path. She didn't see him at first. He leaned against the fence post, half in shadow, shoulders hunched, hat tilted back. A bottle dangled loosely from his fingers. Clay Vaughn, the trapper from the next ridge. Drunk. Again. Well now, he called, voice slurred. Look what the wind carried in. Kate froze. Thought Bo kept you locked up tight, Clay said, pushing off the post. Guess not tight enough. It's late, Clay, she said. Go home. He stumbled closer, breath thick with whiskey. I remember when they sold you, he muttered. Figured you'd end up somewhere quiet. Didn't think Bo had that kind of taste. Kate backed a step. Don't come any closer. He grinned and kept walking. Come on now, he said, voice turning low. Just wanted a look. After all that talk, you owe us at least a smile. Then he reached out. His hand caught her wrist. Dirty, rough, unwashed. Before she could scream, before she could twist away, the barn door slammed open behind them. Bootsteps. Fast. Solid. And then Bo hit Clay clean across the jaw. One punch. The trapper hit the dirt like a felled tree, groaning as he curled into himself. Dust lifted around them. Bo stood over him, chest heaving, fist still tight, blood trailing from his knuckles. He didn't look at Clay. He turned to Kate. You all right? She nodded, but her breath came shallow. Her hands shook. I'm sorry, she whispered. She didn't even know why. Bo stepped forward. He untied the red kerchief from his neck and gently took her hand, the one Clay had grabbed. He wrapped the cloth around her wrist, slow and careful. No one touches you, he said, voice low, steady. Not unless I say. Then he looked at his bleeding hand and shook his head. Damn fool, he muttered. Not at her, not at Clay, but maybe at the world. Back inside, Kate boiled water and cleaned his knuckles in silence. The room smelled of soap and copper and smoke. You didn't have to do that, she said. Bo didn't flinch. He put his hand on you. You don't like fighting. I like it less when someone scares you. She stopped, pressing the cloth to his skin with a little more pressure. I cried, she said, voice catching. But not because I was scared. Bo looked up. Because no one's ever stood up for me like that. He didn't answer. But something passed in his eyes. Something warm, unguarded, as if her words had settled deep in him. When she finished, he flexed his fingers once, and she wrapped the cloth around them neatly. I don't want to live in a world, he said quietly, where a man like that thinks he can say those things to you. Or worse. Kate smiled faintly. Her wrist still ached, but her heart did not. The morning was cold enough to turn breath visible. Kate was kneading biscuit dough in the kitchen when a scream shattered the quiet. High, sharp, one of the children. She dropped the bowl, flour flying into the air like snow, and ran barefoot out the door. Gideon lay near the woodpile, crumpled, his face contorted in pain. His leg was twisted underneath him, and the old axe sat just inches away, its blade streaked red. Kate knelt beside him, already pressing her hands to his thigh. Oh God, she whispered. Bo came running. His face was pale, but his hands were steady. He scooped the boy up without a word. Boil water, bandages, now. Kate ran. Her heart pounded so hard she couldn't hear her own footsteps. She filled a pot and grabbed the clean muslin from the cupboard. By the time she returned, Bo had cleared the kitchen table and laid Gideon across it. His pant leg had been cut away. Blood oozed from a jagged gash along his thigh. Kate pressed the cloth down. The boy cried out, teeth gritted, fists clenched. "I know, baby," she said, her voice cracking. "I know it hurts. Just hold on." She worked with trembling hands. Her tears dropped to the cloth as she wrapped the wound tight, knot after knot, press after press. Red soaked through the fabric, but the bleeding slowed. Bo stood nearby, silent, watching. Then Gideon blinked up at her, pale but awake. "Don't cry, Mama," he whispered. She pressed her lips together, breathing in the name like a prayer. "Mama," he said again, "you make the best biscuits." Kate placed her hand on his cheek and bowed her head, the tears finally coming without shame. Later, when Gideon was resting with his leg propped and the others had gathered close around the hearth, the children moved differently. Mira brought her a blanket. Samson curled up against her side. Levi handed her a carved wooden horse with a broken leg and said, "You can fix things. That means you're staying." Then Judah, quietest of them all, looked up and asked, "So, you're staying?" Kate didn't answer with words. She only nodded. That was enough. They had already called her Mama. But now, for the first time, she said yes without speaking. Bo watched it all unfold from the other side of the room, his hands resting on his knees, his eyes fixed not on the fire, but on her. That night, after the house had gone still, Bo stepped out onto the porch. Kate sat there already, arms folded tight, the sky full of stars that didn't blink. He stood beside her for a long time before he spoke. "I ain't much for talking, you know that." "You say enough," she replied. "When I put that money down in Ash Ridge, I figured maybe I was giving you a way out, that's all. I never thought I had a right to keep you." She turned toward him slowly. "I figured you'd leave once you had your footing," he continued. "And if that's what you want, I won't stop you. I won't hold you to what started as a sale." Kate looked at him. His posture tense, his voice steady but tired, like someone bracing for an answer that might knock the air out of him. She said, "I used to think love meant being chosen at first sight." Then she paused, the wind curling softly across the porch boards. "But I've learned something better. Being chosen again, after someone's seen who you really are." Bo didn't answer right away. She stepped closer, took his hand in hers. "If you're not sending me away," she said gently, "then I'm not going.